Long ball is going to go for a touchdown. The game's over. Webster Slaughter.
Metcalf will go for the score. Unbelievable.
45-40. Run, William, run. He's got blockers in front. 5. Touchdown. Joshua Cribbs turns disaster into a score.
Sight wants it all on this one for Logan, and he is there.
Jim Brown to the 30. Jim Brown is going to go in for another touchdown.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow.
It is Baker Mayfield.
I woke up feeling dangerous.
Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to another episode of the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. I am your host, Andrew Jokey. As always, I got Jack McCurry with me, but today we have another special guest with us. He is Jared Mueller of the OBR. He is the host of the Mueller Sports Report. It's been a while since we've talked to him. How you doing, Jared?
I'm all right, fellas. We are rolling through this off season of transition and, enjoying the fact that spring might be springing a little bit. So let's try to enjoy it a little bit, right?
Absolutely. And, Jack, we're starting to get back into the swing of things here. And I know we certainly have a lot to talk about today. And do you have a good day as you're preparing for this?
Oh, always. It's always nice to talk to Jared. He's one of the best when it comes to covering the Cleveland Browns, and always a pleasure talking to him. It's starting to become an annual thing where we talk to him after the combine because, of course, he makes the trek out to Indy. Always like to get his sense of things going on, not only with the Browns, but across the NFL landscape.
Yeah, for once when we record this podcast, we actually had breaking news before we started recording. And, that it kind of changes potentially the landscape of the top 10 picks of the draft, and we'll dive into that here in a second. But the Los Angeles Chargers have traded Russell Okung to the Carolina Panthers for Trey Turner, and it's pretty much a straight-up trade, which is kind of rare to see in the NFL, especially for two players that are both Pro Bowlers. So this is certainly an opportunity for both teams to get better. And now the Chargers could be looking at an offensive tackle in the top 10. So, Jared, when we look at this thing as a whole, where does this completely affect the Browns, and how much do you think it will inside the top 10? Because their quarterback situation is up in limbo, and that's certainly a route that they can go with their first-round pick.
I think what's actually really interesting to me about it is I don't know what the Chargers are going to do. Everybody looked at it really quickly and said, Chargers are going to looking at a tackle. But the reality is we thought they could look at a tackle anyways. We also thought Carolina could look at a tackle. So I don't know if it really changes the number of tackles there because whether it's Justin Herbert or another quarterback, I still think there's 3 quarterbacks that likely go in the top 10. And obviously that really means the top 9 because the Browns are not selecting one at 10. So I'm not sure it has a great impact because I'm not sure if it just changes who takes the tackle in front of the Browns. But I think it could be really interesting and something to remember. And actually, I didn't know this until I was reading I think it was the NFL.com article that Tom Telesco, who's the Chargers GM, actually was the first person to hire Andrew Berry in Indianapolis. So you also have to wonder if maybe there is some relationship between the Chargers and the Browns now that could lead to a trade as well. So I don't know if it actually has a huge impact. The one area that I think is interesting is there was no picks involved. And so Carolina got older by 4 years, I believe, 3, 4, 5 years, somewhere in that area, and didn't get any picks, nothing for trading an all-pro guard. Now, obviously, guard and tackle is generally more valuable, but I just think it's interesting that a significantly younger player, at least in NFL terms, don't make me feel old, guys, didn't get anything extra added in the trade for him with Trey Turner. So it will be interesting. I do know some rumors on Jalen Hurts to the Chargers later in the draft, which could present them an opportunity to build the middle of their line for a quarterback like that, and maybe look at a tackle later. But I don't know if it really actually greatly impacts the Browns, except for, thankfully, so far the two trades that we know about are reasonable trades. So a 4th-round pick for A.J. Bouye, no matter what anybody says about the Jaguars probably cutting him, he's still a talented player. And then a straight swap here means if the Browns are looking to deal, at least the first two trades look like reasonable deals, where there weren't these huge overpays and market-changing kind of trades, which I think at least is encouraging for the trade market.
In reference to the quarterbacks and the Chargers, we know that they're going to move on from Philip Rivers. How real is the Tom Brady stuff to the Chargers, in your opinion?
From everything I understand, I just don't think there's enough there, if that makes sense. I just don't see what you see on that roster that makes you think Tom Brady is going to want to go there. I know there's talent. I know there's Keenan Allen. There's talk of franchise tagging Hunter Henry, some of those kind of things. But Melvin Gordon's a free agent. And while he may not be that top 5 kind of back, he still was a talented back. They have some other backs there with Justin Jackson and the other guy that I can't think of off the top of my head, who's a very good receiving back and had a good year last year. I just don't know what is in Los Angeles with the Chargers that is just going to draw Tom Brady, except for going closer or back home. So I don't really buy a lot into that. I am really intrigued by the idea of Tyrod Taylor, if I pronounced it right. It's been a couple of years on that one. Him being there for a year with a guy like Jalen Hurts or even like a Jordan Love, some of those kind of players. I just don't see why Tom Brady would make that decision at this point in time.
So, Jared, you were out in Indianapolis for the scouting combine. They changed the format significantly. They moved it to prime time. I seen a lot of the media and a lot of the scouts and draft experts were not fans of the new format. And I also know that you had noted in the Rumor Central that they might be moving the combine from Indianapolis. So talk about your experience this go around as it compares to other years.
So I'll actually give you just the real quick behind the scenes for 3 different versions of it. So a few years ago, the media was involved, was around, was in the stadium, different things where they could see things, could know what was going on, could catch players, could grab players here and there. There was almost like it is in Mobile. I haven't been there yet, but I'll be there next year, where there was just this natural engagement, kind of like spring training in Major League Baseball. Fast forward to about a few years ago, where all of a sudden all the media is just stuck in one big old conference room, or a ballroom of a hotel, and literally we were watching the NFL Network. That's it. We were watching the NFL Network like you were watching the NFL Network. And we were about a half a mile away from where the interview room was. And so we would watch the NFL Network. We'd try to get as much information we could from the TV that everybody else was watching. And then we would march a half mile to go interview players while other players were still working out. Those players that we went to interview were literally brought in behind their podiums, kept away from the media, go up to the podiums or their tables, and then be escorted away. So they really did this thing where they tried to keep the media away from any just natural conversations with players. Now you fast forward to this year. So this year, media got there at about 8 a.m. Players were interviewed at their podiums. They could go back to the same, well, not the same media room. They could go back to a media room that was closer to like 3/4 of a mile away or a mile away, watch TV, write their notes, wait for more, whatever. And then nothing from 11 a.m. or so until maybe there was a random GM or a head coach or whatever until the evening. But in the evening, the media room was closed. So when workouts started on quote unquote prime time, the media room was already closed. It closed at 4:30, 5 o'clock, somewhere in that area, while workouts were just kind of getting started. So as a media member, if you didn't remember, some of the hotels didn't have NFL Network to even see what was going on there. So literally the media was there for these canned interviews, basically, and then nothing else. And the part that was most beneficial to me was the evening. So now, early in the week, evenings, everything went the same. People are out. There's Kevin Stefanski. There's Andrew Berry. They're at a certain restaurant. We see them. we're good. They're out until 2 a.m. Everybody can hang out and interact a little bit. But then all of a sudden, Thursday night, when Thursday and Friday used to be kind of everybody shares information about what they've been doing during the week, all of a sudden Thursday night, all the NFL bigwigs and agents and everybody have workouts going until 11 o'clock at night. So I know one restaurant that some Browns people arrived at 2 a.m. Guess what? Old people like me, we were asleep. So it just really is set up where they don't want the media involved at all. They only care really about the primetime money for ratings and those kind of things. And so they've really tried to push really the media out. And I've talked to a ton of them who are no longer going to attend. And so that's going to be interesting to see. But it's telling that some of the coaching staffs weren't there because of how it was all set up. It really didn't feel like it was a good use of their time. So one of the thoughts is there's a belief that this upcoming year will be the last year in Indy, and that they are moving to LA where they're building that huge sports complex and they want to have uses for it. One of the uses would be to have the combine. They're building a medical center, yada, yada, yada. And they're going to try to even control it even more. So take it away from being in a town and kind of put it in a complex. And so now primetime East Coast means midday West Coast kind of thing. So they start at 1 o'clock, get done at 5 o'clock. And now they can still get their primetime money, but they can not piss off agents and players, which they did this year. All of a sudden, players were all of a sudden being told, hey, you got to lift in 5 minutes. Let's go. I mean, just all kinds of things that just aren't healthy for the players, aren't good for representation. And honestly, the teams weren't happy about it either. So all in all, the combine went from a place that A, was semi-easy for someone like me to gather information, and B, was a place where relationships grew and yada yada, all that stuff, to a place where it almost felt pointless to be there. And then after this, unless Stephen Thomas is going to put me up out in LA, it looks like I may have gone to my last combine.
And you did mention the players, and that was going to be my follow-up. You've seen, I think it was from Matt Miller, that said agents were ticked off about how the itinerary was for the workouts and everything, and you've seen more injuries this year than usual. Do you think it's going to get to a point that if they're changing this to prime time for ratings and everything, that agents will tell players to not even attend the combine, maybe go and do the interviews and the medicals, but not do the on-the-field drills and prepare more for the pro day?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you have players who are not participating in their bowl game for their colleges because it doesn't benefit them, more and more the combine doesn't seem to benefit them. So you're going to have a lot more top players like Chase Young did this year and a variety of other ones who are just not going to do anything. And so you make something for prime time. And listen, maybe the prime time, it just kind of exacerbates the situation. I think this is the direction it was going anyways. I think more and more players and teams understand that these are just workouts, that they'll run at their pro day. They have tape, all of that kind of stuff. I just think the combine is going to become less and less important. It's why I'm planning to be at Mobile next year. I think there's just more value in watching those practices. The other thing is, from a media perspective, the workouts that matter the most to me aren't the ones they timed and aren't the ones that the general fan likes, right? The general fan likes the 40. They're interesting because they're fun to me. But besides that, I want to see like the Jeff Okuda when he's flipping his hips as if it was nothing. Those are the type of workouts that really matter from an analyst perspective. So I just think you're going to more and more see the big names are just not going to participate.
And you also like to see those drills at the East-West Shrine game or the Senior Bowl down in Mobile. You like to see those guys go one-on-one, whether it's offensive line, D-line, whether it's wide receivers and corners going against each other. And that's kind of where my follow-up is. How much from the negative part of the combine is going to shed on the positive aspects of the East-West Shrine games and the Senior Bowl down in Mobile?
Yeah, I think those are going to really kind of put a spotlight on themselves. I think they're going to continue. I think Jim Nagy has picked up for Phil Savage. And to be honest, I don't know all the people who run the East-West Shrine game, but I think they're really going to take a little of that shine. I think they're going to look at things that fans and maybe more hardcore fans are interested in, and let the Combine and the NFL Network stuff that they're doing really be more for the casual observer. And so I think Jim Nagy understands how to do that. I think he's working towards how to make it more interesting, how to raise the stock of the Senior Bowl, not only because it gets more people into the Senior Bowl, more of the players want to play, but it brings the attention to football, to things that are actually happening on the football field, which obviously for those of us who love the sport are really interesting for us.
I think that's maybe a trip that I'm gonna have to make maybe next year. Maybe set that up down in Mobile. I think that'd be a lot of fun, and who knows? Maybe I could convince Jack to come with me. See if that could happen.
Rumor has it you have to fly into Florida or New Orleans and then get a rental car, or you can drive like 12, 13 hours, whichever one. I haven't decided yet, but I think I might even drive. I have a Prius, nice little, efficient, and I don't care if anybody makes fun of me, nice little gas efficient thing that makes my life easy to drive.
I'll have you ever seen Jeff Dunham, the ventriloquist, talk about Prius? Okay.
No, I haven't. I'll have to look that one up.
Okay. You'll have to check that out after we're done here. It's pretty good entertainment for those that drive Priuses.
Nice.
You might not like me after you watch
Probably not.
Still funny regardless. Well, the Combine is a great time to view a whole bunch of talent in the upcoming draft, and same with the Senior Bowl and whatnot. And, we're in the part of silly season where rumors and speculation runs rampant every day, and some people are being ridiculous, and it's just the nature of the beast this time of year when this is really all there is to talk about. I know free agency hasn't come across yet, so it's really kind of hard to speculate on the draft without that piece of everything falling into place. But when you look at this draft, I think we could safely assume that offensive tackle is going to be the pick at 10, unless there's some big one in the top 10 before the Browns even pick, and they're forced to go best player available at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really good, and I struggle sometimes giving John Dorsey some credit because he annoys me as a team builder. That's why I love David Griffin of the Cavs. He was all about building a team. But I have to give him credit in that while I don't think you want to ignore offensive tackle, he ignored it going into a draft where there's at least the top 4, but in some people's minds, the Ezra Cleveland, Josh Jones, Lucas Niangs, Austin Jackson, Prince, I don't want to pronounce his last name, whoever, there is just a group of guys that some people are pretty darn high on. And so I think the real question is, while we all assume a top 10 pick at offensive tackle, let's just say 2 are off the board by the time the Browns pick at 10. And let's just say those 2 are their top 2. Generally speaking, NFL teams have a bigger gap between players than we do when we're analyzing them, because we can look at those top 4 in whatever order: Jedrick Wills and Andrew Thomas, Tristan Wirfs, and Mekhi Becton, and we can go, wow, those are 4 really good offensive tackles. But the reality is team-specific things are so important. And so if the Browns have their top 2 offensive tackles off the board, even if the other 2, quote-unquote, top 4 are still there, they may have a closer gap between those 2 and the next guy who fits their system better than maybe we think. And so I'm going to use Becton as an example. If Becton is a 85 for them grade, where Tristan Wirfs is a 95, but Josh Jones is an 83 or an 82 for their system, then you have to ask the question, and maybe they have a couple other guys in that low 80s grade, do they trade down? Do they take someone like Chazon, or however you pronounce his name, out of LSU? Do they think someone like Xavier McKinney, a free safety who can do a lot of different things, is actually worth being drafted up there? Because again, free safety is really important. I just think we have to remember that NFL teams don't think like analysts thinks. Their boards look significantly different because they do not, in general, have as many people as high grades because of system fit as analysts might do. And that can be really difficult for fans because they're like, there's top 4. Why wouldn't they draft them? Well, they're top 4 for the whole NFL, but they're not top 4 maybe for the Browns at that same level. So I'm trying to prepare myself, and I can't really explain why because I don't know. It's a lot of little things that are starting to want me to prepare for something other than what just seems to fit so perfectly. Listen, if Tristan Wirfs is off the board and Andrew Thomas is off the board, to be honest, I'm not drafting Becton or Jedrick Wills for the Browns at 10. So I'm trying to prepare myself. Now, the Browns might have another 2 that they think are good fits that I don't. But I don't know. I don't know why. I'm just trying to prepare myself for something a little different.
And if Thomas or worse wasn't on the board at 10, I am of the proponent that we trade down and then collect a few more picks and then maybe take a guy like Josh Jones. Everybody talks about, with Andrew Berry back in the fold, that a trade down seems a lot more likely. How likely do you think it is as things stand now as we inch closer to the draft?
I think it's very possible. Let me just say it that way. And I think what actually may help it, if the Jalen Hurts stuff that I'm hearing about the Chargers makes some sense, then that means Herbert or Love, depending on who is the third quarterback, could be there at 10, right? Because if the Chargers pass, if the Panthers pass, Cardinals aren't going to take one, Jaguars aren't going to take one, Dolphins and Bengals have already taken theirs, right? So then you're looking, does someone trade up to 10 to get that quarterback? And again, is that the Raiders? Is that the Colts? Is that the Bucks? There's a few teams kind of in that next 10 that could actually be looking in that direction for a quarterback. Or is it New England at 23, right? If Tom Brady goes on his merry way. So I think, this is what I know about Andrew Berry. He's going to make a decision that is thought out and isn't, when we talk about being aggressive, and it's something that people on our OBR forums have been really frustrated with, aggressive doesn't mean spending money on players or trading up or whatever. It literally means they're going to do whatever they can to get who they want, where they want them, for the price that they want them. So if that means trading down with New England and getting an extra second round pick and a player or whatever it is to get what they want, to be really aggressive about getting what they want, I think they're going to do that. So if that's moving up to get Wirfs, right? Again, the Telesco connection with San Diego could be really interesting now that San Diego has, at least what I think, upgraded their offensive line. So I think you're going to see movement, and I don't think Andrew Berry and the whole group is really scared to move anyway, especially because they know future draft picks are tradable, right? And now they get traded at a discount, but they are tradable. So I just think I think they're going to make some moves, and it really just depends on how they grade those offensive tackles, because I think they're gonna like a Javon Kinlaw more than most people do. I think they're gonna be a little lower on a Derek Brown, but they could make that move and try to get some interior pass rush, and then hope to find something else for the offensive tackle.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was headed next. Because if I sit here and do the math, let's say there's 3 quarterbacks taken in the top before the Browns pick. So Burrow, Tua, and Herbert. Let's say those guys are taken. Say Chase Young is gone because there's no way he falls. So that's 4. You have 3 tackles, so that put you up to 7. You're looking at a scenario where Okudah, Simmons, Chason from LSU, the top wide receivers are there at 10, are not there or could be there when the Browns pick. Where do they, I would think at this point you would take best player available, but the trade down scenario, like Jack, I'm kind of thinking would be the better option at this point. But which of those players, if they were still there, do the Browns take and say we cannot pass on maybe on one of those defensive guys?
I think Isaiah Simmons in there. I think they like that versatility. But it is telling that they look like they're going to move on from Joe Schobert. So that also tells you they don't value the typical linebacker the way we might. So, but Isaiah Simmons' versatility is really interesting. I think if it's Okudah at 10, I think they're just going to trade down because someone's going to want him. He's just too good. I do think Kinlaw probably over Brown, but I think either of those interior players, because we know that interior pass rush can just be so valuable. I think that could be interesting to them. I do have some assumptions. I have a piece up on the OBR. It just says NFL draft scenarios mostly work in the Browns' favor, but the assumptions are pretty simple. Burrow is going in the top 3. Tua is going in the top 5. Chase Young is going in the top 4. Okudah is going in the top 6. Simmons is going in the top 9, probably closer to 5. And at least one offensive tackle will go in the top 9. And so what that really means is there's only 3 other picks that have to kind of be figured out. And so is another one of the picks, like you talked about, a quarterback, is another one of the picks a wide receiver? Because here's the thing: if they have a AJ Green, Julio Jones type grade on a Jerry Jeudy, I could see the Browns making that pick. Because again, what you don't want to do as a bad team is have your overall talent base get worse than another team. So if the Browns have a 95 on Jerry Jeudy and they pick somebody they have a 90 on or an 88 on, well, that's literally 7 grade points lower. So while the fit might be better or the positional need might be better, then the Ravens much lower in the draft or the Steelers lower in the draft can all of a sudden draft somebody at 85, 86, 87, 88, right? So the overall talent of the team doesn't significantly improve because you went for need. And so, listen, I think the Browns are going to run more 3 wide receivers than anybody has assumed because everybody looked at Minnesota. Minnesota had 2 quality wide receivers. 2. That's really it. So they ran a lot of 2 tight end sets with a fullback and a running back and the 2 Diggs and Thielen outside. So I think Jeudy, Ruggs, whoever it is, I don't think the Browns are scared of making the best draft pick possible. The good hopeful thing is hopefully that's Tristan Wirfs, right? For me, hopefully that's Andrew Thomas. Hopefully the guy they have a really good grade on also is available at 10 and also plays offensive tackle. That's the hope. But I don't want to see a team continue to get worse overall in talent. So I think defense, it's Kinlaw. On the offensive side of the ball, if it's not an offensive tackle, I think it really is Jerry Jeudy. He's the best overall wide receiver, I think. But you can't rule out someone like Ruggs who, good gracious, that speed we've seen in so many ways can just open everything up. So I don't think you can discount those 3 guys. Derek Brown wouldn't shock me, but I would definitely put him below really those 3.
And Jared, you mentioned that the Browns and Joe Schobert are likely to part ways once free agency opens up. That was reported during the combine. Based on what you know, like, is it the Browns not wanting to pay Schobert more than $10 million, or is Schobert really asking for way more than what's being reported through the media?
So it's a combination of things. Schobert wants to get into free agency at this point in time. There's just been so much turnover, right? In his 4 years, he's had Sashi, he had Dorsey, now he has Andrew Berry. There's been a lot of turnover. He's interested to see what it could look like outside of Cleveland. And Cleveland, Berry and those guys don't really see the value at the position, especially given everything else that they need financially and where the money's going to have to go. And it's not as simple as this, but realizing that Larry Ogunjobi and Greedy Williams and those guys were 2nd-round picks, right? Nick Chubb is going to come up on his second contract pretty darn quickly. So there's just all of these players that are coming up. And so while they like Joe Schobert, they also have a good idea. And it's not a coincidence that we got that report. I know our Lane Atkins had some information for our insiders around that time as well. It's not a coincidence that happened at the Combine. Because at the Combine, teams start to get an idea of what other teams are willing to pay for certain players. And so I think the Browns figured out, not only is Joe like anybody, like you guys, like me, like, I'd like as much money as possible, please. Like, that's simple. We all do that. But not only that, but I think the Browns at the Combine learned, hey, the Packers, yeah, they might be okay with 12, 13 million a year for Joe Schobert or whoever it is. That's just the easy connecting point that people have started to point to. I think there is where they realized it's not only that we don't want to pay a ton more than 10 million, but teams are really willing to pay for him, which is why I asked the question in an article today on the OBR, should the Browns just franchise tag Joe? Not because they want to sign him, but I mean, Miami didn't want to sign Jarvis Landry, but they franchise tagged him so they could get something for him. So it's a question that I posed today is, would that make more sense? I just think the market doesn't fit with what they value given everything else.
Would they consider the transition tag, or after the Alex Mack debacle, which I know that was a completely different regime, that the Browns would not want to go down that road once again?
I think they see that as pointless because they have an idea of what other teams are willing to pay for him, and they're not willing to pay it. So that's all the transition tag does. The transition tag is we would pay whatever, but the player doesn't want to come back to us. So let's transition tag him. So whoever signs him to a big deal, we can match it and we'll be good. We'll get our player back. That's really what the transition tag does. It doesn't do much else. You get right of first refusal. And so I don't see there's a point to that because they know they're not willing to pay what other teams are willing to pay Joe Schobert. Now, could that just all be smoke? And all of a sudden you see Joe's price tag come down and the Browns all of a sudden are back in the picture? It's possible. We've seen crazier things happen. But again, it happened at the Combine. That's really telling to me that both Cleveland and the Schobert squad got a good idea of what money was out there. And Cleveland wasn't okay with it, and Joe was pretty happy.
And as the linebacking room stands right now, it's Christian Kirksey, who's coming off a torn pectoral muscle, Sione Takitaki, who barely played his rookie season, and then Mack Wilson, who got a majority of the snaps during his rookie season. How do you think the new defensive coordinator Joe Woods plans to utilize these linebackers, and how do the Browns look to replace Schobert potentially?
To be blunt with the second part of that question, I have no idea. I have no idea how they're going to prioritize the linebacking group. It wouldn't shock me if this was a transition year for the linebacking group where they found two veterans or a veteran who, just knew the system, signed for a year, did okay. Morgan Burnett is a good example last year as a safety, who they brought in, didn't pay a ton of money, paid a little bit too, just knew the system, was able to play and do what they wanted him to do. That's really my guess for what they'll want to do. I'll just be honest. I think Mack Wilson, they need to slim him down and make him their strong safety, backup strong safety, that type of player. A guy who can do a little bit of everything. He's not good against the run, or he wasn't good against the run. He probably could become good against the run, but he doesn't read the run well. He's not physical enough. We saw that he can play the pass a little bit, and so I think there's something there. I think Sione Takitaki, with Joe Woods' defense, is going to be more of a situational, I'll call it a pass rusher, and I don't mean that like he's coming off the edge, but I think you use Takitaki, you use his aggressiveness, right? While he's not a big thumper, you use him coming downhill, and you hit the running back on your way to the quarterback, and that's really what you want him doing. You want him coming downhill as hard as he can, as fast as he can, and let everything else kind of flow from there. It's why he would have been an interesting fit with Schobert, who cleans up well after people and diagnoses really well. I think what's interesting, and people have asked about the Kirksey tweet, and I forget exactly what he tweeted, but it seemed ominous. But I think what his reality is, the Browns would like to have Christian Kirksey back probably. It'd be nice to have some kind of veteran who knows what he's doing. But if Joe Schobert's leaving, guess who has all the leverage then? Yeah, it's Christian Kirksey, right? He's got the leverage to not renegotiate that contract. So you want me, pay me my $10 million or whatever around there that he is owed. So I think that'll be a more interesting conversation this year, this offseason, is how do they figure it out with Kirksey, who honestly, I think he thinks he's worth more money than he would get on the open market, which is kind of the opposite of like Rashard Higgins, who might have an idea, you know what, let me get back here for a year. Let me get a little bit of money and I can get paid later.
This defense last year, and not just the defense, but the entire team could have benefited from veteran leadership. And if you're going to replace Joe Schobert or have to replace him, and let's say they had to replace Kirksey too, I would think it would have to be, adding guys in free agency that will be able to help call the defense, because that's Schobert's main responsibility, is to do that, get everybody aligned, and just the presence of veteran leadership, whether it's offense or defense, but defense in this case, it's going to be so crucial for guys, in my opinion, like Myles Garrett to take that next step, for guys like Ogunjobi to take that next step, for Denzel Ward to take that next step, for all these young guys who, have been part of all this losing and haven't really had any kind of veteran around to guide them, guys who have not been parts of winning culture. That's where I kind of see that spot on the defense going to a veteran or two to come in and kind of rally everybody together on top of calling defensive plays while being out there.
Yeah, you and I agree on that. The concern I have, so before the Browns hired Stefanski and Barry, the thing I wanted them to do is really invest in kind of the middle class. So I didn't really care if they spent a lot of money on certain players. I wanted them to bring in a bunch, like just a bunch of random middle of the road kind of guys. But there's a thing, it's a one pager swirling around from Paul DePodesta from back when him and Sashi Brown took over the Browns the first time. And one of the lines says, don't pay for depth. And I think that's something I have to remember, is that while I would be willing to pay a little bit of money for some veteran depth, now obviously when we're talking about starting linebackers, it's a different conversation, but the Browns have made it, at least in that kind of context, have made it clear that paying for depth isn't something they want to do. And so while I would want them to kind of buoy their young roster with a nice middle class, it looks like, based on that and just some other things that we've heard, that might not be kind of their way of going about the team building process. So I have to kind of lower my expectations in that regard. Doesn't mean I'm right, but it's on paper and it's a very clear thing that has laid out a bunch of things that DePodesta and that group valued. And it wasn't just a value based on where the team was. It was kind of an organizational value chart. So I may have to readjust what I expect or want, because it looks like they want to pay for quality and starters and then draft or get undrafted free agents or get minimum level players for everything else. So if they do that, I feel like you and I will be feeling like we lost out on something, because we're losing out on that veteran leadership, those $4 or $5 million guys that just may not be coming to Cleveland.
I agree with that. Don't pay for depth, but I would pay for leadership. And to me, that's what this team desperately needs, especially in the wake of everything that went on last year, and to a team that, or to a franchise that just hasn't won anything. I think you bring in those guys from a winning culture, from a winning organization, it would be so beneficial to those players that are already here, and kind of a young coaching staff too. You have to remember that as well. So bringing in some veteran guys in terms of leadership, I would do that. I wouldn't just pay for depth, but I would pay for leadership.
Yeah, I feel you on that. I think the thing to remember, and this is all hopeful, what I'm about to say, but if you think about last year's coaching staff, you basically had three guys who wanted to prove themselves. And so I'm not sure they were leaders as coaches, because in reality, coaches need to be leaders, right? Like you had Freddie Kitchens who wanted to prove that he was amazing. You had Todd Monken who wanted to prove that he should be a head coach. And you had, my goodness, I just forgot our defensive coordinator from last year. You had that guy from Arizona and Carolina that I'm totally whiffing on right now. And I appreciate
Steve
that.
Wilkes.
Thank you, Wilkes. See, I had Wirfs and Wills in my head, and I couldn't get to Wilkes out of our, the two offensive tackles in the draft. So you had Wilkes, who thought he got screwed in Arizona, and then you had a quarterbacks coach in Ryan Lindley, who was just hired because Freddie Kitchens knew him, right? So for me, I want the coaching staff to be leaders, and I want mature adults. I don't actually, even as a mental health professional, I don't really buy into the whole winning culture thing, because what ends up happening then a lot of times is you're comparing it to what you did before. But what you did before was came out of the coaches that you had. So the Patriot way is because of Bill Belichick, and the leaders there are leading under a Belichick kind of way of leading. And then you take that and you go to any other coaching, go to Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan's a great coach. He is not Belichickian in nature. So the leaders from New England may not be leaders in San Francisco because that is Kyle Shanahan's style. I want freaking adults as coaches, coaching and leading. I obviously love mature people as players doing their thing, but in the end, I really think it's the coaches. So are these coaches bought in to being great at what they do as coaches, as leaders, all of that kind of stuff? Let Jarvis Landry run his mouth about whatever. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, but let the coaches lead and let the players lead in their own kind of way. I just don't know if I value quote unquote player leadership as much. It's why I don't give a crap about the quarterback they bring as a backup, whether he's a good teacher of a system or blah, blah, blah. Can he flip and play? Does he know what he's talking about in the quarterback room? That kind of stuff is more important to me than leadership. If Baker Mayfield goes down, I don't want Drew Stanton grabbing the flipping football. I want someone who can actually throw the ball down the field more than 10 yards. And so that's for me. I value ability and coaching over player leadership. I know tons of people who value player leadership. I'm not saying I'm right. It's just my value.
Which means you want Colt McCoy as the backup quarterback, right?
Abso-freaking-lutely. Especially, it would have been really good if the San Francisco coach that was here when Colt was here and treated him like crap was here, because that'd be awesome. I love those kind of redemption stories. No, I mean, honestly, Colt has looked fine when he's played recently. Again, I'm okay with Case Keenum. I would pound the table for Marcus Mariota, but that's because I really need my draft love of Marcus Mariota to pan out at some point in time. My goodness, did I want him badly. Was that Homer? Who the heck was running the Browns then? Whoever it was.
Ray Farmer.
Farmer. Yeah, I really didn't want, I wanted Marcus Mariota. That was the Danny Shelton draft, I believe. I was really a big proponent. So I just want Mariota there so that he can make me look smart if anything happens to Baker. That's really what I want. But I think Mariota at least seems like he might be able to play versus just being somebody who knows a system or just being somebody who's been around for a while. Again, that's just me. I'm not saying it's right, but it seems like Mariota could play really well in a wide zone scheme with a bunch of play action passing with a great running game. If anything happened to Baker Mayfield, who knows? I'm not saying it's right. That would be fun.
There's been talk about the Jaguars interested in moving Nick Foles. And in order to move that contract, would you take that contract and a second round pick at this point?
Yeah, listen, I'll just be honest. I'll do anything for more draft picks. Well, that sounded weird. Let's go ahead and back that off just a little bit. I would be okay with the Browns doing anything for additional draft picks. So, Nick Foles, the problem is similar to Matthew Stafford. Nick Foles' cap hit is gargantuan. And the dead cap is huge as well. So it just doesn't seem realistic to make that trade for Jacksonville, right? The cap hits are just so big. But listen, someone posited the other day about the Eagles really want off the Alshon Jeffrey contract, and Andre Dillard, who they drafted last year in the first round in the 20s, I believe, could be who they would try to use to get off that contract because they're going to bring back Jason Peters. Jason Peters is not coming back to be the backup. So they would have Lane Johnson and Jason Peters. And so, yeah, I would absolutely do whatever it took to get a second round pick, to get an Andre Dillard, to get those kind of players, because here's my deal. That kind of quality player is worth the cap hit, right? Yeah, it sucks to have Nick Foles getting paid $15 million to be Baker Mayfield's backup, but I was going to pay a backup quarterback $8, $9, $10 million anyways, right? A good one. So if I was going to pay 8, 9, 10, well, let me pay a little bit more for a quarterback who's shown he can be a good backup, proven he can play, and I got a second round pick. Heck yeah. Or let me use Alshon Jeffrey 15 times a game as a red zone, kind of a Joe Juravicious big slot receiver, while also getting me my starting left or right tackle. Absolutely, I'm going to do that. Like, when I think of aggressive, that's what I think of. Like, give me another Brock Osweiler trade. Absolutely. Let me do that, especially because you're talking about two players in Foles and Jeffrey who, in their limitations, can also still play. Brock Osweiler, I might have been a better quarterback than him.
So, Jared, like, there could be more roster cuts coming over the next couple of weeks, and the one that seems to be hanging over the Browns' head is Olivier Vernon. It seems like, you know, the Browns want him to take a pay cut. I mean, if you're reading the tea leaves through the media, I'm of the belief that if he does get cut, he could make that money up back on the open market. What do you think the Browns are thinking right now as it pertains to Vernon? Are they trying to trade him or trying to get his contract restructured? Because I just don't think they can afford to let him go.
So, sorry to keep pimping out my pieces, but I wrote a lot lately. So I wrote about him a little bit in the Browns need to stay disciplined piece. I forget exactly what I called that darn thing, because I think it's an important test for the Browns. And I don't remember what we wrote for only for subscribers and not, but I think Vernon is such a huge test. Yeah. So it's for Browns being disciplined will be tough, but needed. Vernon is such a tough thing because here's the thing. Yes, he is talented, but if they don't value him just as a player, if they don't value what he gives them with his injury concerns, for the contract that he's under, all of that stuff, if they don't value that, if it doesn't fit, if it doesn't work, they should cut him. And I know that sounds extreme, but you can't have an organization saying, yeah, we don't like this, or this doesn't fit us, but we're going to keep him anyways. I know that opens a huge gaping hole at edge rusher in a draft that has like none, right? Now, could they draft Kinlaw and move Sheldon Richardson to outside some and try to get some edge rusher some other way, Taki, whatever? Sure, they can do a lot of things. I just think as an organization, they have to stick to who they are. They've done so much over the years. It's literally what they've said this offseason. We want to have alignment from top to bottom. You can't have alignment from top to bottom that everyone agrees, whether it's from DePodesta or not, but Barry and Stefanski can look at their roster and say, Olivier Vernon, given his fit, given the rest of the players on the team, and given his contract, it doesn't all work together for us, and then still keep him. Like, those two things for me don't show a disciplined, organized organization. So do they want him to take a reduced salary? Yes, they absolutely do. Does he think if they want him to cut it in half to $8 million? Yeah, Olivier Vernon probably is worth $8 million to most teams, and he gets to pick where he goes. Like, that's not complicated for a guy who's only been here for a year, right? And so he gets the opportunity to go back to New York for maybe the Jets or wherever he would want to go for similar money. And so at some level, it seems similar to Kirksey. He's got a lot of leverage. And so the Browns, I don't think there's a trade option out there because teams know that they might cut him. And so, unfortunately, for me, I've already assumed Olivier Vernon is likely off the team, and they have this gaping hole that Chad Thomas can't fill. Jannard Avery's not there to fill. And there's nobody in the draft outside of Chase Young for me that I would draft in the top 10. And so that means there's a gaping hole at edge rusher that they're going to have to get really creative to fill.
And it could fall into the same thing as linebacker, where it could be another transition year, like we talked about earlier with that position, to where you sign somebody to a 1-year deal, just kind of to fill it for now, and then you could address it next year in the offseason or in the draft or however they so choose.
Yeah, I mean, you could go with Vic Beasley coming out of Atlanta, see if he can kind of ignite what he had in his rookie season. There will be a few kind of prove it deals there that I think could be interesting. The other thing is I believe the Browns, from an organizational perspective and from their defensive coordinator, Joe Woods, they are an organization that believes coverage is more important than pass rush. Now, I'm not saying it's a huge gap, but if they were making a decision like John Dorsey did at number 4 with Denzel Ward, they would have made the Denzel Ward over Bradley Chubb decision, most likely. Again, I don't know the grades, because for them, their belief is coverage over pass rush. Now, again, I don't know how strong that belief is, but at least at a minimum, if there's a tiebreaker between two players, someone who can cover has a little bit more value for the Browns organization than someone who can rush the passer.
Go, Jay.
So, Jared, with free agency coming up here in a couple weeks, how do you think Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski are going to attack this? Like, are they going to be aggressive? Are they going to try to get a couple impact starters? Like, how do you see it playing out for them as they sit with around $60 million in cap space?
Unfortunately, we don't know. And I don't say that to be flippant or just kind of blow off the question. Normally I know. Like, I have a really decent idea of some of the things that are going to happen, and sometimes I can put them up in our Rumor Central, sometimes I can't. This year, literally at the Combine, because of what we don't know about the new CBA, we have no real good feel for where players are going to go. We have no idea what agents are going to tell players. Like, we just have nothing. So it wouldn't my belief is there'll be at least one impact player that is paid pretty highly. And my belief would be that's going to come in the secondary, which you can assume that is in the safety region. That would be my belief, is there's going to be at least one pretty large contract given out. After that, I don't know if even the Browns at this point know. From what I understand, they're literally building, and we'll call them boards. Honestly, they'll probably have something more fancy, but if you think of an Excel spreadsheet, they're literally building kind of 2 columns right now, or 3, based on what is current, because that's the only one they know for sure, what is currently happening, and what the current CBA looks like. They're building one based on what they think the CBA, or what the CBA would look like if the NFL players approve it. And then I know they're building a third one kind of based on some extremes. And so in that, everything kind of changes, right? Is we would be willing to pay this guy this amount under the new CBA, but only this amount under the current CBA. So there's just so many variables that unfortunately, I don't know if teams really have a real good feel for what they want to do. And I know, talking to a few agents at the Combine, they know teams that are interested in their players, but when they used to get conversations within a couple million, 1 or 2 million, they're now getting ranges that are closer to $5, $6, and $7 million. And so agents aren't even sure where they can kind of direct their players. So I do think the Browns have one, to answer your question a little quicker, one big free agent, and then everything else is going to depend on the CBA.
Yeah. How important is it that this CBA either gets wrapped up very quickly or they decide to shelf it for now? Because do you see this impacting the draft, trades, free agency in such an aspect that nobody really does anything until this matter is resolved? So that way they know exactly what they're getting into before they make a franchise altering move.
I think the players and the owners Yeah, I think by the time the league year opens, it's over. Like, there's either going to be a lockout or whatever it's going to be called, strike or lockout, or we're going to know in a week, basically, somewhere around a week. Because, for example, Dallas can right now they're going to franchise tag Dak and they're going to transition tag Amari Cooper. Well, the minute that CBA gets approved, they can't do those things. They can't do both. And so I don't think teams or players, there's no benefit to either of them for this to continue on if it's going to get approved. So I think in the end, we know something in about a week about the CBA. But I think it's also why you saw the two trades that have been approved or going to be approved already are pretty simple ones. They're pretty straightforward, right? There's not a lot of creativity there. It's pretty much Bouye for a fourth, and it's player for player swap. You didn't see a lot going on there. You just saw straight trades. I do think you're not going to see a ton. You're literally, if that CBA vote could go down to the last minute, and all of a sudden, none of us are sleeping. Those of us who have daytime jobs are wondering if we should take some vacation, uh, and a lot of stuff all of a sudden explodes because teams are. If you think about the team agent conversations I just talked about, think about the team to team conversations that are happening, where they're talking to each other and sort of trying to negotiate and trying to win a trade while also going, well, if the CBA does this, then we want to do right. So they're doing all of these like machinations inside their own organization and then trying to communicate with another organization that has 7 different boards going on with draft and free agency and so there's so many variables that all of a sudden it's overwhelming and I think you have seen less things quote unquote break because of that. And if nothing gets figured out, I think you're going to see the floodgates open real quickly, and then you're going to see a pause. You're going to see a pause as people are still trying to. They want to not miss out on Tom Brady or whoever, a couple guys, and then you're going to see a pause as everybody's like, "Wait, hold on, what's going on here? How's that going to work?" They're just trying to gather all that information. So it has been an interesting offseason because really people just hung out at the combine because they really didn't have enough information to do anything else.
I guess our final wrap up here is: are you ready for a 17th game and for the Browns to miss having a bye by one game because now you'll have to be the number 1 seed to get a bye and not the number 2 seed?
Did you just ask me if I'm ready for the freaking Browns to make the playoffs? Yeah, I'm good. Uh, you know, to me, all of that stuff is negligible for if we really think from the big picture. We know of 6 teams because we know of 6 teams, right? And so the idea that 2 teams get a bye only means something to us because 2 teams currently get a bye. So it's like anything. Like, here's the reality. I'm looking at a can of Coca-Cola right now. If Coca-Cola was invented today, as a person who loves Coca-Cola, if Coca-Cola was invented today, it would probably not get approved, right? Like, it's not healthy. There's nothing good about it. It's crap. It's nasty. It's disgusting. You don't even know what any of these chemicals are. Well, the same thing, like it's approved only because we're used to it. So I think the idea that there's only one buy and all that stuff is just it's just something we're used to. I don't think it matters that much. Um, who knows what's going to happen? The Browns are going to go undefeated next year. I don't know. But I think it's interesting in that it really shows how connected we as sports fans become to things that are arbitrary anyways, right? We all of a sudden are attached to, well, 2 teams get a bye, or we're attached to Eastern Conference versus Western Conference in the NBA, or all these random things that are really arbitrary in their nature. We're just used to them. And so I'm used to Coca-Cola. If it never existed, I probably wouldn't be missing out that much.
And, with the, proposed 17 games, there really hasn't been a lot of discussion on how it would work venue-wise. Are we going to every other year have 9 home games and 8 away games, or 8 away games, 9 home games? Is every team going to have a neutral site game every year to alleviate that? Do you have any idea how this is going to work?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the schedule makers are going to get their salaries doubled because it's going to be 9 home games one year, 8 home games the next is the plan. But that only works it was some heck of a lot of creativity, right? So I'm not going to pretend like I understand it. I don't know if you can do 9 home games for certain conferences so that way it balances out. I don't know if that's a way you can pull it off so that it balances every year. I think you would have to do something specific with kind of how the conferences or the divisions match up. So, um, you know, the AFC North, their non-conference AFC opponents are the AFC East for 2 years, and then you just basically kind of have a home and home. Like you'd have to do something like that, and I'm not going to pretend like I know, but the basic plan right now is for 9 and 8. They don't have enough time and stroke to have neutral fields because the neutral fields would generally probably be college fields that were used on Saturday. And all of that would just add more kind of confusion to the schedule. So it's going to be 9 and 8 most likely. Some of them will be easier because you're going to go to London, so that kind of helps that a little bit, but it doesn't help a lot. So yeah, I'm pretty confident the schedule maker people should get their salaries doubled because it's not something you can just throw into a computer and the computer shoots it out. Because not only that, each stadium uh, teams have certain rights over other things. And so for some stadiums, Taylor Swift is more important than the football team. And so you have some of that kind of stuff going on. So there's just way more variables than that. My head's starting to hurt.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting. And one thing that I've thought about and I would love, and I don't know how feasible it would be, but I would love for every team to have one rival that they play every year, and that's how they kind of balance this out. So, outside of their division, so the Browns play the Lions every year, or the Browns play the Bills every year, or they play the Bears every year. I would kind of love to see that, kind of like a regional thing, but they'll do whatever they want to make the most money, and we'll have no say or control over any of it, and our opinions won't matter when it's all said and done
Yeah,
on how they
unfortunately.
decide to do it.
Yeah, unfortunately, the masses always win, right? And then when you live in a capitalistic society, good or bad, whoever listens the most wins. And so it's why, for example, High Noon is getting pulled off of ESPN. The masses didn't like it. So unfortunately, no matter what we are, whoever is the masses, whoever are spending the money or watching the thing or listening to the thing, they tend to win. And unfortunately, that means sometimes certain media members stay in their positions too long until they say stupid crap.
I have no idea what you're referencing. I'll keep my mouth shut. All right, Jared. On that note, I think this would be a good spot. Every time you come on, it is always great. Bring fantastic information. We always have great discussion. Where can people read you? Where can they follow you? Where can they pretty much invade your life to see what you do?
Sure, absolutely. So all of my writing for the Browns is at the OBR. So just go to theobr.com. You can follow me on Twitter. It's at Jared K. Mueller. That's JaredKMueller. And then my podcast just search the Mueller Sports Report. And yes, I'm purposely playing off of the Mueller Report. I don't give a crap about politics, but I am playing off of that because who knows if it helps from an SEO perspective. But yeah, the Mueller Sports Report. I will get back to doing longer form pods like this one and the great one at 1085 Gridiron.
Jack, got anything else?
No, just for people that check out our site, thedogland.com, Jack Duffin started his roster deep dive this week. So far we have quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers out, and we'll be pumping stuff out every day. So definitely go check those out.
We also will be pumping out a lot of video on social media as well that will have audio overlaid to it, and we're excited to pump all that out. There'll be some stuff from Jack Duffin. There'll be some stuff from Stephen Thomas in regards to prospects, so be on the lookout for that. As always, check out the website at thedogland.com. Follow us on Twitter and on Facebook at The Dogland. Follow me on Twitter at Anthony Joki, Joki. And with all that, we're going to get on out of here. And most importantly, which is why we do this, go Browns.